Hi there, everybody. Matt Lawton here. This is the Astrological Winds channel. I'm going to take a look at the astrological weather report for the week of October 6th through 12th. We've got a few things going on, a continuation of Mercury's journey from the weekend. If you'll remember, this just passed on Monday and Tuesday. It's going to go into Scorpio and square Pluto and then get in a yod with Neptune and Uranus. And then on Monday also, we've got a full moon in Aries up here on the board. Very pure one, not making any other aspects, ruled by Mars, which is not making any other aspects also. And then later in the week, Venus has an interesting journey. It's going to hit three of the planets, including an opposition to Saturn next weekend, which will be one of the challenges of the week, no doubt. Okay, so that's what I'm going to talk about this week. Just a little business first. The Astrological Winds channel is a free video blog on YouTube channel. I've been doing it for years on YouTube channel now. If you have a YouTube account and you like what you see, I'd really like you to become a follower. And when you do, don't forget to turn your notifications on so you know when I post the blog. And remember, it's a free blog. It actually even cost me money to put it out. And what I really ask people to do to pay forward that is to pass the link along to somebody else that they think might be interested in it. Let them check it out. Over half the world believes in astrology now. It's not a thing to find someone in your contacts and send it off for me for it. I really, really would appreciate that. And remember, if you don't have the time to watch the video, it is available on podcast too. It was actually a podcast long before it was a YouTube channel. Just go to your podcast app, look up Astrological Winds channel, and it's an exact audio copy of this same video. And that frees you up. I know like our time is valuable, so you can listen to it on your way to work or, like while you're doing a jog, walking the dog, whatever it may be, like you get a chance to, check it in. Also, if you have an Instagram account, I do have an Astrological Winds channel page there, and I do put the link to the blog there every week so that come up in your newsreel there. And you can always find it on my website, www.astrologicalwinds, not channel, just winds.com. And there's a blog tab on top. And not only this week's blog, but there's weeks and weeks of blogs there that you can go back to if you need to hear the monthly again or the annual one. You can go there. There's a little calendar page you can check out. Plus, it lists all my astrological services. I've been a professional astrologer for over 20 years. I've been doing charts after being trained for 7 years to do that. And I'd love to do your chart or someone else's chart that they're looking. It's definitely not the same as getting a computer printout or getting a friend to do it who's read a book or even reading a book yourself. Definitely done on a much more professional, holistic level. And I'd love to do that for you. Your chart never leaves you, or any of the other services, predictive or whatever. So check the website out for that stuff. Let's get into this now. So if you'll remember last weekend, the one that just passed, we definitely had a really tough assignment. And I really saw it going on in the world where, we had that Venus conjunct the South Node in Virgo at the same time that Mercury was opposite Chiron and quincunx Saturn. And, most likely that made some relationships really difficult. There may have been some painful conversations. There might have been even some communication shutdowns. And then inside kind of spin us out a little bit, get us into some depressing thoughts. And that was only part of the journey that Mercury was going through. It started that on Friday, and all the way through this Tuesday, it continues on today, on Monday, going into Scorpio, a new sign, and then immediately will square Pluto and get in quincunxes with Uranus and Neptune, actually in a yod configuration again, which I have right here. There it is. There's Mercury down here and Uranus, and then Neptune up here with Saturn, and in that yod. And I've talked to you guys about yods before. It's one of the most faithful aspects. It's like pointing us in a direction that a lot of times we have a hard time getting to ourselves. And I've said it before, that's one of those things where you just kind of go along for the ride. But, so there's a lot going on with Mercury. And, so first, Mercury going into Scorpio, And that will be for the next 2 or 3 weeks, right? And so that's when we can really dive down deep into any problem, anything that's bugging us right now, especially in our mind. And we can get really obsessed with it during these next 2 or 3 weeks. Anything that we don't have what we consider a clear, solid answer, we're going to like just try to keep finding that answer. We're going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. So, like, it does give the mind, like the mind of a researcher, where you can really, look into the details of things and see how things have structured out, so we can really get to the bottom of the things, really, is what it is. It really is what it comes down to. Like, pry out the secrets is kind of like figure out what's going on, and not only, with whatever we're interested in, but even within other people's minds is where a lot of this can happen, where we're trying to figure out what other people are thinking. What are they holding back from us? What are they not telling us? What are they lying to us about, even? It's kind of like we can get really obsessed with that energy on an intellectual or mental level, and it can really preoccupy our mind, really, really get it to like this really deep place. But, the thing is, it can also come out as very sharp, cynical, sarcastic energy, because there can be a lot of resentment that's building up. There can be like, and when people get quiet like that, people start to get suspicious with one another. Like, they're like, what are you holding back from me? What are you trying to do? And so when it does come out in a form of resentment, it can really be heard in the tone of our words. It can really come out as a very, very angry tone, and so, like, and a lot of times too with Mercury and Scorpio, it is naturally to be quieter, to kind of zip up a bit, keep the deep stuff really within, and we're chewing it over, really, so that's, it's not a time. I mean, it is a time, really, when we are kind of more alone with our thoughts, but yeah, like I said, that can make us start to think, hey, what's going on with other people, though? Like, what are they thinking? And then the square to Pluto right away is like putting it on steroids, basically, that whole energy of the Scorpio Mercury, because Pluto is the planet that's most similar to Scorpio energy, right? It's some people even consider it, a ruler or co-ruler, of that energy, because it's very, 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 very similar. So this can really exponentiate the obsessive quality of the Mercury in Scorpio, and it's kind of one of those things where we literally cannot get something off our mind. We know we know we've all had days like that, where you're just so preoccupied with something that no matter how hard you try, you just can't get certain thoughts out of your mind that are like, literally circling around that. So it's very obsessive, and and it's trying to find those answers again. So it can be very pushy energy too. It can be very coercive in trying not only to find out the answers and get those answers from others, but pushing what we believe in very strong armed ways. Like, we'll probably see this play out in the world politically with a lot of our leaders and stuff, like how they're, taking their anger and just pushing and pushing, but the funny thing is, because it's a square, what you're going to do by pushing that stuff is you build up a lot of resistance from others. They don't want to be pushed around. So the brushback is like, oh wow, now I get this resistance, and that just even fuels more resentment with this kind of energy. It really can get you really angry inside at certain people, and then all of a sudden, boom, our words can get very cutting and impulsive and come out and be like bang, really hit someone hard, is a good way to say it. But, I really think the best way to use this energy, and it's not going to be an easy thing to do, especially with the full moon which I'm going to get into in a minute, feeding this kind of obsessive quality of stuff too. Really the best way is to go inside with the Mercury Pluto and basically look at yourself and be like, where is this energy coming from that I'm feeling so intense about? And it's like dominating my thoughts and actually coming out at times in words, and like trying to get a grip on where is that coming from. So it's almost like being your own analyst in a way, kind of taking a look and being like, whoa, like, wow, okay, that's where it's coming from. And then really the obsessive quality of that aspect can be useful if you can detach yourself somewhat, become a little bit objective, and use it into something you really need to research. So, like if there's something going on in your business or whatever that you really need to get to the bottom of, like some statistics or something like that, this is really, energy that can really get down and deep, and it can see how everything is kind of like connected together. So it's really, really good for that. And a lot of times, people like, once again, it's really good for looking into the human mind. Like, how does the human mind actually function? Our own psyches, psychology, depth mind studies, even the occult, even stuff like astrology, anything that you want to look deeply into. This is like your mind, right? Like a magnifying glass, right? Like it's just like, oh, okay, now I can really see the intricate details. And then you've got this yod going on, with Uranus and Neptune. And this one can definitely, like I said, yods are like, it's one of those things where I really believe it's trying to take us to a place that it would really be difficult for us to naturally get to. So it can be weird, it can be an up and down kind of roller coaster journey. And I always say, you guys probably heard me say this before, like just strap the seatbelt on and trust, you're going to get to the end point. And many times, if we can do that with a yacht, it takes us to a place we needed to get to, but we're unable to ourselves. And we look back and we're like, thank God, I got here, But this one can really stoke up with Uranus and Neptune together. It can really stoke up the imagination into some new places, but they can be weird. They can be odd, they can be really different. It definitely can bring up an interest in metaphysics and the spiritual world, the supernatural world, wanting to investigate the subconscious again, also this may give us like some strange like urge or feeling that we need to go somewhere. And it's most likely because there's some kind of information there that we need to get, something that is really important for us. But the other thing is, it can bring in very unrealistic plans. So, so this is definitely one, I think if you kind of let it go, not try to resist it, it'll bring us to a place, where we need to be, and that endpoint can be very valuable, but we may find it really hard to communicate what we're seeing, like under all this, because it's also kind of complexly put together and it's not very linear. There's a lot of mixed up stuff going on, a lot of synapses like moving together, so it may be really difficult to communicate what we're sensing right now. There's a lot of sensitivity that can bring in brilliant ideas, but it can be really hard for other people to follow it, to see it, and this stuff can also jack our nervous systems up. It can kind of make us feel edgy because, we're out on a place where we're not normally at. So, so it's a time where we may actually have to let go of certain things that we're used to, make some adjustments, and to allow some of this energy in and allow it to coalesce. Otherwise, this can really scatter us out, it can be really difficult to discipline our minds under yet this energy. Yet there's some great creative, inventive ideas in there if we can find a way to get them out. So, very interesting continuation of Mercury's story in the first couple days of this week. And then Monday night is our full moon. this month at 15 degrees Aries. So that's where you want to look in your chart is, it's the moon in Aries and the sun in Libra. So they're in opposition, the full moon. And at 15 degrees, both of them, you look at the houses in your chart that they are that those 2 degree points are falling in, and that's where the full moon is falling in your chart, and that's probably the part of life that for you is going to be most affected by this full moon. So it's ruled by Mars. And what's interesting about this full moon, it doesn't make any other aspects. It's only the moon opposite the sun. So it's pretty pure. Then the Mars is in Scorpio, the sign that it rules, the other sign that it rules besides Aries, the sign the full moon is in. So it's a really strong Mars influence on this. And the Mars actually doesn't make any aspects to any of the other planets either. So this is like really, really strong Mars kind of energy wrapped up in this full moon. And the conflict of this full moon is going to be on the relationship axis again. This time of the year, they said when the sun went into Libra is when relationship part of the zodiac takes over, and really relationships become, uh, can be very, difficult to navigate through at times this time of the year. But this full moon is all about how we relate to ourselves versus how we relate to others. And the moon in Aries is very self motivated, and because of that, it can get in a lot of conflict. And it even sees on a subconscious level that conflict is a way to actually connect with people emotionally, because conflict comes from what? Anger, right? And that's an emotion. So, when we get in conflict with someone, that's actually, drawing someone in, and we're creating a relationship, but it's very subjective and self-centered. So that's where that Aries energy is coming from. I mean, the moon in Aries wants a challenge, it wants some kind of competition. That's what makes it feel good. That's what gets it off. And in order to have a challenge or a competition, it's usually some other person or some other group or something that is representing that. The moon in Aries is moving very quickly, and it can get very impatient, can get very impulsive, can get very argumentative, get into battles in your life with anyone that you feel angry with, anyone, that can be aggressive or have a proclivity for aggressiveness can this full moon can really bring out those inclinations. So they people like that, type A personality people who, if you have a strong temper, it's going to be hard this full moon to control it. It's going to get easily triggered by other people, and so it's going to be a very quick temper. It's ready to jump out. It's ready to be pushy. It's ready to be impulsive about what it wants to do. And because of that, it can definitely, the effects of our actions and our words can hurt. It can hurt other people. We don't have a lot of tact when the moon is in Aries. We have we are very pushy, and we act independently, and we really don't care if it's hurting other people. We're very impulsive. And so that's what the problem is with the full moon, because the sun in Libra, like I said, when the sun went into Libra, is the first sign on the relationship side. That is the sign that wants to connect with other people. It wants to bring balance into relationships. It doesn't want to be all selfish about itself. It knows that in order to have harmony and equality with others, that it has to be open and receptive and giving to others. So you can see, how difficult this full moon can be, because on one side, you're seeing the sun in Libra is seeking out harmony and balance in relationships. And on the other side, we're just so self-motivated emotionally that we may, just push others away. And so that's quite a conflict there. It's like, okay, there's a lot of frustration in trying to connect with others if you're being that pushy. And one of the things that the moon in Aries needs to realize too is, even though the sun in Libra is all mellow and peaceful and wants to be a peacemaker, if you back Libra energy into a corner, where they feel like they have to come out fighting for justice, they will be a very formidable enemy to that, to anyone. So that moon in Libra, I mean that moon in Aries, should be really careful of that, and knowing that, hey, you know what, this can come out really powerfully if I back this person. If I keep pushing them, they may react really strongly, and then all of a sudden they may jump onto the moon and Aries train. So like I said, not making any other aspects with any planets, a very pure, this energy, and it's not an easy one to balance. And then you bring in the fact that Mars is the ruler of it, and Mars is in Scorpio right now, the other sign that Mars rules besides Aries. So it is a very strong willed Mars right now. And it has a really difficult time taking into account its effects, the actions that and the effects that it has on other people and the environment around it. And if there is any, like Scorpio, if there's any smoldering resentments going on between you and others, it can really burst out into explosive energy in the moon, with the moon in Aries. This could be like even violent energy. You can feel like you've been wronged by someone. And Scorpio shows it may go way back into the past too. But it's it's going to be very, very difficult with this full moon to stay neutral or objective or detached in the way that you're looking at things right now. And I mean, really, the best way to use this energy is to self motivate, to be aware of your actions and how they can affect others around you, and to really tap into that energy and take it and put it into something constructive like your work or something physical that you're building, and you can make a lot of progress with it. You can make some really big leaps because there's a lot of energy to tap into. But I really think it's going to be very, very difficult to like keep control of its energy, because it is going to feed back into the Mercury square Pluto and the Mercury in Scorpio. And like it can, the next, couple weeks can be a lot about obsessing about other people and things and not being able to let it go. And and it can get at times burst out into big tantrums, little tantrums of anger, and how that may be expressed. So got to be really conscious of this energy. And even if we are, I still think there'll be times where it's going to get us and we're going to get impulsive and react, but there's not a lot of things to like help alleviate it, is a good way to say. So it's really going to be up to us to try to control those actions. And really, my best suggestion is to throw yourself into your work and make sure you're doing something physical to get some of that energy out. So Venus's journey this week is kind of interesting too. On Wednesday is when it starts off with one of the nicest, most beneficial aspects there can possibly be. Venus is sextile Jupiter together. That brings together the two benefic planets in a harmonious aspect. So this is a day Venus and Jupiter get together. We're usually really at ease. We're contented. We're at peace in our world. The environment and others are acting well, responding well to us. People can be very generous. They can be very friendly. And what's really cool is they give each other opportunities, opportunities to grow in some way. Many times they're financial type of opportunities, but it's also good for any kind of new relationships, romantic ones. Like they can really start to build up in a very positive way. It can bring in a lot of growth to the people involved, and it attracts people to us too that are of a similar vein, so that we do give benefits to one another, people that are easy for us to get along with. So definitely too a great day for any kind of social events on Wednesday. Definitely can get yourself out there, attract people to you or similar to you. Just like, just a really nice day for that kind of thing. So just a beautiful midweek thing. And after all that intense energy from the full moon and Mercury, it might be in one of those days where it's just like, just get to take a little bit of a break from this stuff. And then Thursday, the very next day, Venus is quincunx Chiron. And this is an interesting one. This one can go like a couple different ways. I think, one way you can be hurt in relationships, right? And want to separate yourself from people that you perceive as hurting you. So, like, you may, have gotten through all this stuff and be like, hey, this person, constantly is a source of pain for me. And it's time for me to separate myself from them, whether it's physically or emotionally or, just kind of get some distance. But it also can help us on a positive way. And this is the better way, really, to use this energy. It can show us how our own attitudes about relationships may be what is the root of causing a lot of our pain. And if we can adjust those attitudes, if we've learned something from that, then it can actually bring in a lot of healing, a lot of understanding between you and whoever the other is. So this one really depends on your attitude, the Venus quincunx Chiron, about where your consciousness is at. Like, are you going to play victim and be hurt by someone, or are you going to take the opportunity to be like, hey, maybe I need to take a look at myself, make some adjustments, be honest and forthright about how I'm feeling in this relationship, and then together the relationship can shift and go into some new territory. So that's really sweet. It's really dependent on our attitude. But the toughest aspect for Venus this week is next weekend. We got a Venus square Saturn right in the middle of the weekend. And that one is definitely tough because that one and it's the weekend too. Venus wants to have a good time, and when Saturn gets involved, it basically means that there may be some duties, responsibilities in relationships or in the world that come up and block us from doing what we really want to do. So that one can be tough. It can make you feel like you're giving up a lot of yourself for someone else or for some situation. And what that can do is make us retreat emotionally into the inside. So from the outside, it looks like we're being cool and reserved. That's how other people kind of perceive that. Um, but yeah, it's like whatever we want to do next weekend, there may be some things, some duties that preempt that and take it away from that. Or it also could be a situation where we want to hang out with our loved ones and they're just not available. And so we end up alone and we kind of feel lonely. And once again, that's one where you have to ask yourself, well, is it your own attitude that's making you feel lonely just because you don't have a certain person or persons in your life? All of a sudden, like, you feel like, restricted emotionally and there's nowhere else for you to go with it. So that's something like, to examine the attitude about what you have and where you're getting those connections and love from, because actually with that, it sounds like it could be a place where it's coming out of a fear, of somehow losing something. So in general, Venus Saturn definitely helps us to learn about ourselves through others and how we restrict ourselves. So, there's always relationships of that mirror that's always reflecting back. And maybe it's not as big in us as it is in the other, but it still will show us, yeah, it may not necessarily just be this person. There may be some attitudes and decisions that we make that block us to continue to form ongoing relationships and get them deeper, get them more into a growth thing. And then the other thing about this one shows we may have some serious decisions to make about money. And we want to err on the conservative side, is what this is saying. We could take some hits, realize we got to budget up a little bit, and do things like that. All right, well, that's what I got for this week. Definitely an interesting week. It's quite a mix, and it's going to be hard to control our own energy, the things that we're emotionally obsessing about, and what's motivating us to take action, and not feel like we're gonna like at some point go off on someone else, because this is really a week where relationships once again are being tested, and we're seeing a lot of deep stuff, and we're seeing where people are coming from, and and it's hard, and it can be triggering to a lot of our old stuff and our attitudes, and it can be really hard to break that cycle. There's a lot of obsessiveness in here. There's a lot of desire to try to control the other. And really, the best thing to do would be to self motivate and, start to try to understand, why you're coming from that place. What are the things behind that are driving you to make you feel that way? And see if you can start to, like, rather than project that out onto others, take that energy, learn from it. And then if you're feeling like lots of, you know, energy, angst, and stuff, do something physical with it instead, and do it in detail too. Sink really deep into it, because there's the energy available this week to do that. All right, next week, you guys, let's see. Venus is going to go into Libra, which is just really, really sweet. That should really turn the relationship page around and really get us like back into a sweeter zone and out of the heavy stuff. So I think the relationship storm of the last 2 or 3 weeks will start to clear up next week. And then the sun is actually going to get into a T square with Chiron and Jupiter. So those will be the two main things I talk about next week. This is Matt Lawton. This is the Astrological Winds Channel. You're going to pass the link along to someone else right now, because I just did this for you for free, and you're going to do something for me now. Thank you so much. And also, remember, like I said, I am a professional astrologer. Please check the website out. If you're ready for a reading, or someone is, I have done, charged for over 20 years now, professionally trained to people, always giving me great feedback on how beneficial it has been for their life to know their chart, or to know their predictive energy, or know their children or their relationship, things like that. I have a whole menu on my website, the services that I have, and the prices are there. And if you need to work with a payment plan and you can put half up and pay off the rest in a month or two, I can do that for you. um just and if you know of anybody too that's looking for a reading, please do that too. And then if you're a group and you need a lecture or a class or a workshop, mini readings, I'm available for that too. If you're looking to learn more about astrology, I've got some podcast type beginner lessons, and I am, always open to starting a beginner's class, but I need X amount of students for that to be worth my time. So if you're interested in something like that, let me know. And just remember, they also available on podcasts too. So, pass the link along. I really appreciate all you guys. Thanks for anyone who's given a monetary. If anyone wants to give a currency donation to the blog, my Venmo is at Matthew, two T's, hyphen in the middle, Lawton, Lauten, or my Cash App is $ Matthew, two T's, Lawton, Lauten. No amount's too small, even $5. And the folks who do give, some of you do give regularly. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. And all I can say is pass that blog along. We're going to get through another tough week of relationships, but I think, we'll start to see some light on the other side of next week, and we'll take a look at that. Okay, until then, this is Matt Lawton. This is the Astrological Winds Channel. Have a great week, you guys.